The big story this week is the downward spiral in India-Canada ties. Now, ties have hit an all-time low, with India suspending visa services for Canadians till further notice, citing operational reasons. India has also asked Canada to downsize its diplomatic staff in the country as the Canadian diplomatic presence in India exceeds that of India in Canada. Now, speaking at a press interaction on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, the Canadian Prime Minister reiterated that there are credible reasons to believe that agents of the government of India were involved in the killing of a Canadian on Canadian soil. Meanwhile, Khalistani extremist Hardeep Singh Nijjar was murdered in Surrey in June, as we covered. He called on the Indian government to cooperate with the investigation into the murder, adding that his government is not looking to cause problems with India. However, Justin Trudeau was forced to acknowledge what he termed as New Delhi's growing international influence as it forges stronger economic and security ties with the West. And the Narendra Modi government has dismissed Trudeau's claims as absurd and motivated, leading to reciprocal expulsions of diplomats, and India maintains that no evidence has been shared so far. Toughening its stand, India also slammed Canada for acting as a safe haven for extremists. Right, joining me live currently, Rupa Subramanya, senior journalist. Rupa, now the big question is, if Justin Trudeau has the evidence, shouldn't he be sharing it? Take us to the reactions on Ground Zero.
Thanks for having me on the show. So what's going on here is that, there's been calls by the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, less than 24 hours after Justin Trudeau broke these allegations, made these allegations on the floor of the House of Commons on the opening day of Parliament. The leader of the opposition requested that Justin Trudeau provide more evidence that to back up the claim that Indian agents were behind the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and so it's been and he's also been criticized for making these allegations without providing any proof so far, and he was pointedly asked by a journalist on the sidelines of the UN meeting yesterday whether he would provide evidence to back up his claims, and he just deflected. He didn't answer the question and just gave a boilerplate response about how he believes in the importance of the rule of law and a rules-based system. I don't know. There's still an RCMP investigation going on, so I don't know if it will actually see this evidence at any point. But I just hope that whatever Justin Trudeau has in his possession, it's a smoking gun, because you're going after a major democratic ally. It's a very important partner for the West in the Indo-Pacific to counter China in that region. India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and to make these explosive allegations with very little proof or no proof, and I hope that's not the case. I hope he really has something, but we'll only know that once the investigation is done.
Indeed. Also joining us live from New York at the moment, senior journalist Namrata Brar. Namrata, it's always great to have you back on NDTV. Now, Trudeau has tried to rope in the G7 and Five Eyes countries to put pressure on India, but he's only received mild support so far. But significant words from the US NSA on Trudeau's allegations against India. In fact, Jake Sullivan said there's not some special exemption you get for actions like this. So it's going to be interesting to see how the Biden administration handles this situation.
Yes, it certainly is a quagmire for the United States, given the extent and the warmth of the US-India relationship, which has skyrocketed in terms of closeness across defense and business in recent years. I just want to make a point on 3 counts on this issue. Number one is the fact that you have the fact that an international court of law will bring all this evidence to light. Now, whether or not Canada can prove this electronic evidence, which they certainly might possess and they might have, let's give them the clarity of thought there. But can this be proven? Because wiretapping on diplomats is also comes with its own set of laws. So will that certainly see the light of court? We don't know. Second, the fact that US in the past has also had issues, such as its own killing of its Saudi Arab killing of Jamal Khashoggi, a US permanent resident, also a journalist in Turkey. We saw the aftermath of what happened there in 2018. It did criticize it, went after it, but now is signing a Saudi Arab defense treaty currently as we speak, or is in the process of making a pact. So does US play a black and white game or more of a gray diplomatic checkerboard game, which has been the way that US self-serving interests and international politics have played out? That's a big question. And thirdly, yes, there is this Khalistan element, which has been there in Canada. Remember, there are votes as well. 6% of the Canadian Parliament is the vote of the NDP, the New Democratic Party, which is controlled by Jagmeet Singh. And that is a real political compulsion for Trudeau, which has to have its support, given the fact that Justin Trudeau is falling in the polls, is nearly at 30%, and it does need this faction's vote. So those three angles will come in together, and we will have to see whether this is a short-term call, whether this is a message being sent out on this particular killing, but does not extend to a complete fallout of diplomacy between the nations.
Indeed, lots to unpack there. Thanks so much, Namrata, for taking us through those three crucial points. Amit Barua, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Now, what do Trudeau's accusations mean for wider diplomatic ties, especially in terms of immigration and trade talks?
I just wanted to say that, these are very serious allegations that have been leveled. And this really marks a new low in Indo-Canada relations. After the expulsion, tit-for-tat expulsion of diplomats, one would have hoped that, this matter would have rested there. But clearly it has not. And the fact that India has chosen to suspend visa services marks an escalation in this diplomatic war, if you might call it, which has broken out between India and Canada. Remember, this is a friendly country. This is not a Pakistan or a China that we are dealing with. We have tens and thousands and lakhs of students and residents and, immigrants going to this country. So I do hope that, the escalation that has happened, good sense will prevail. We've had a situation where Canadian national security officials were here before the G20 meeting to discuss, this episode. This is what the Canadian media has been reporting. So my, two bits on this would be that better sense should prevail. Calmer heads should be brought into play. And of course, there is a bit of a competition as to who is the closer ally to the United States. And there is also information that the intelligence has actually come from one of the Five Eyes countries. So if that is the case, then it would be better if, if saner voices would prevail in both governments. And it's absolutely correct to say that if evidence was available or is available, it should be presented. Not just to the government of India, but now it's time to put it in the public domain because the public has got aware of this. Because at the end of the day, what happens when a war breaks out? I've lived in Pakistan as the Hindus correspondent, so I know what visa wars are all about. So the bottom line is that ordinary people should not suffer in this game. What has happened, if it has happened, Trudeau has been very careful in the language that he used, but it's a very serious incident and it needs to be investigated, and it needs to be investigated in a manner where everybody is satisfied. That's unlikely to happen, but an open, credible investigation is a must into these allegations. And also, we do know that these countries, whether it's Canada or Australia or other Western countries, we know not just the Khalistanis, but people from the LTT were allowed free reign in this country. So what happens is that if you allow extremist groups or extremist leaders to run riot, there are obviously going to be concerns. But at the same time, it should be a calibrated effort. It should be done in a deliberate manner. And I do hope that the government of India will rethink its policy of escalation. If there are numbers which they want to reduce from the Canadian side, that is indeed the government of India's prerogative.
Let's also just bring in
But
Rupa
suspension
Subramanian,
of visa services is not their prerogative.
As we wrap, Rupa, now this row undoubtedly will have ramifications for Canada's position globally. But if you could just tell us about Trudeau's internal compulsions as well domestically.
Well, the speculation is that he's basically done this for domestic political reasons, principally to placate the Sikh constituency, which is an important constituency here in Canada. It's possible that he did not want to lose the vote to Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the New Democrats. The New Democratic Party, although elections are 2 years away, but he's been tanking in the polls recently. He's being hammered away by the opposition for things like inflation and housing. There's a housing crisis in this country. And the economy has actually stagnated. It hasn't grown since 2018 or 2019 for 5 years. And if this continues for another 5 years, we are looking at, possibly a lost decade here in Canada. So, there are some basic bread and butter issues here in Canada that Trudeau had to deal with, or he's not been dealing with it. And so a lot of people, have been speculating here that perhaps by making these explosive allegations, it would change the conversation to something else. He's also faced quite a bit of heat in not really taking the Chinese interference in Canada's electoral system seriously. He was eventually forced to recognize the importance of the issue and constitute an inquiry into the matter, but ended up appointing a childhood friend of his as the investigator, and then that person had to resign. So. Right. There are a lot of moving parts here. I'm not saying that Canadian intelligence doesn't have it right. Neither am I saying that Indian intelligence doesn't have it right on Hardeep Singh Nijjar. I'm just saying that, the manner in which Justin Trudeau went about making these allegations against a major ally, a fellow democracy, and not a tin pot dictatorship, I think he could have handled it better.
Well, thank you so much, Rupa Subramania, for joining us, and Namrata Brar and Amit Barua for joining us on this episode of India Global and offering your analysis and insight.